JKB back with another episode. Today on the show I'm reviewing the JXD Singularity. This is a gaming tablet that was actually sent over by gearbest.com, so link in the underbar to them. Thank you for supplying this review unit. They reached out to me and said, do you want to review some of the stuff off our website? I said, sure, why not? So they sent this over, and this is the first product I'm reviewing off of gearbest.com. So let's get into this device. As you can see, kind of looks like a Switch, but does it compare? Let's find out. The JXD Singularity is a 7-inch gaming tablet running Android 5.1. The idea of this device is to bring the emulation of the classic retro games you grew up playing, but to be able to take them on the go. The screen is full HD at 1920 by 1200. I'm very impressed with the screen. The first thing I opened up was YouTube to see how clear it would be, how crisp it would be, and knowing what my videos should look like, they look great on this device. So I should say something now publicly. You know, when this device was reviewed by other people, they were complaining about air bubbles below the screen. And one thing I didn't notice until I was like halfway into fooling with this device, that there was a screen protector over the screen, and I actually had the same problem that many of the reviewers had, air bubbles beneath the screen. I thought, what a piece of junk. But then I realized it was just a screen protector. Now, some of the reviewers out there did find out after, oh, sorry guys, it was a screen protector, and you know, they gave it a negative score because it obviously looked horrible. And then some other ones just say that, no, I took it off. They're adamant that they took it off, which is, I'm very skeptical about. But in saying that, I have it in my hand, and the screen looks spectacular on this device, and it's flawless. So, in terms of that, that's number one thing you kind of need with a device like this. Can you imagine it actually had those problems? I'd be ripping in a new one. Doesn't have those problems. So, screen, resolution, all that stuff, really, really good. Because this is basically a tablet with a controller attached to it, you'll be able to use it for everyday things like email, Google, and Facebook. All of these seem to run as you would expect them to run on a tablet, without issue and smooth. The 5-megapixel camera, on the other hand, isn't the best, but you'll still be able to use it to make video calls. One of the key selling points of this device is the screen, and I've already stated it looks spectacular in my opinion. But on the other side of the coin, you have to get into the emulation. That's where you can download your own emulators to this device from Google's store and use them to run ROMs of your classic games. This is where a lot of the other reviewers of this device seem to be confused. The device comes with an app already installed on it called Happy Chick, which is used to download your ROMs. I don't really need to get into how illegal this is, but I'm not here to tell you what to do with your life. I'm here to tell you if this bloody device works, and I'm happy to say it does for the most part. If you launch a ROM from within the Happy Chick app, it'll actually use the app itself to run the emulation. That's kind of the first problem here, because there is a noticeable delay between the input buttons and what's happening on screen. This has been reported in many of the reviews I've seen for this device, and I'm going to just chalk that up to lazy reviewing. They simply said it was a negative for the device itself without doing any further investigation, and I think that's kind of pathetic. The Happy Chick app isn't the only way to use this device. Happy Chick is just an app that's pre-installed. You'll be able to download any apps you want from the Google Store, and once you find the right emulators, they will run without delay. And the best part is you'll start to find emulators on the Google Store that actually run the games without delay. So maybe some of the other reviewers should have taken their time with the device and understood that you don't need to use the Happy Chick app to download your ROMs. You can obviously do that from outside the device, and then you can download your own emulators. So I think it's very pathetic that some of these reviewers didn't really do the research and got essentially a $400 gaming tablet for free, but didn't really do their job. So that's unfortunate, and that's why I took the time with my review to figure these things out. In terms of the emulation, there are still problems here. The device can run a whole gamut of retro gaming systems, from the NES all the way up to the Dreamcast. It's up to the emulation itself on how that will kind of happen. I mean, some of the apps really do run all of them perfectly. In terms of the NES, it runs flawlessly. I had no issue with the Super NES. I had no issue with even a PlayStation 1 game. In fact, PlayStation 1 runs like a dream on this. So in terms of its emulation, it's going to come down to the emulators you find on the Google Store. The Dreamcast, however, says, you know, it runs on here, but you know, it kind of is not worth even getting into. And the N64 needs a lot of tweaking before you can actually emulate it on the device. You can run some of the emulation games for N64 at 720p, which does look spectacular because obviously that's upscaling it from its classic 480, but it just has issues. It's not going to run as well as you hoped. But on the other hand here, the Android games that you can download, you know, not illegally from the store itself and pay for them, those all seem to run really, really well. However, I did notice a few of them didn't look as good as, say, like the iPad version or even a console version. Obviously, we're not talking about Nintendo Switch here. This is just a gaming tablet that runs emulators through apps on an Android software. So that's what you're going to get. The battery is impressive. However, the charge time seemed to be a little longer than I expected it would be. The device, however, lasted days without needing a charge, and I was able to download tons of ROMs without a problem. Let's get to the pros and cons of this device. First, when you output through the mini HDMI on top to your television, it does do it at the full 1080p, but not how you would expect. It does 1920 by 1200, so it's actually squishing this screen on the main screen, and there's no option to change that. Next, it's not really plug and play. You turn the thing on and you kind of have to figure out how to get the ROMs, how to get things working. So it's not working directly out of the box, and some people in other reviews were giving it shit for that. But I mean, to me, it feels like one of those classic PCs. You remember back in like 1999, you get a PC, you'd have to figure out all sorts of things, how to install games, drivers, all those things. And I gotta be honest, it is a negative, but it kind of was fun trying to figure this thing out. Once you get it working, you get that reward of like, yeah, I figured it out. But I mean, obviously it should come out of the box kind of working. And it kind of does with Happy Chick, except for that delay I talked about. So you have to go to the App Store and get more emulators to get that to work. I had a seizure. The touchscreen seems to be working here and there. It's sometimes, like in Happy Chick, seems to be a little delayed when you touch the screen. And I should also point out you can turn the screen horizontal or vertical depending on which game you're playing, which is a plus. But it is a negative. It doesn't run as smooth as it does on the home screen in all of the apps, which is very, very strange. Next up is the audio through this. Obviously is not spectacular. When you use your headphones, it's okay, but I did notice certain apps gave some sort of buzzing in your ear. It made no sense whatsoever. The Nintendo 64 and Dreamcast need a lot of fiddling before you can get it to work with any of the emulators on here, and the Dreamcast I never really did seem to get to even work, so that was disappointing. But on the other hand, the PlayStation version of the games here and the emulation ran like a dream. Resident Evil's amazing on this. To be able to take it on the go is pretty cool. The last thing I want to talk about in the negatives is the triggers. The rest of the controllers feel great. The analog sticks feel really good, surprisingly. All the buttons feel pretty good, but once you get up to the triggers, that's when you notice, it's not so good, because the travel distance between when you push it down and the actual connection is large. So once you hit that thing, you really have to hit it in to get it to, you know, work. It's kind of disappointing. And last but not least, for cons, for some odd reason, the camera on the front of this device is all wonky. I'm not going to even get into the details of what it's doing, but sometimes you turn it on, it has a red filter over it, and you have to turn it and face it to a white light before it registers back to the proper color. I don't know. So if you're getting this device hoping to take photos, that's not good. Don't do it. In terms of the pros, there's actually quite a bit here that I'm surprised about. It plays a ton of the classic systems from Nintendo to Super Nintendo, MAME arcade games, plays everything, but some of them just don't work. So Dreamcast, I never really got to figure out. And a lot of the Nintendo 64 games do run, but you have to fiddle with them to get them to work flawlessly. The PlayStation 1 games, however, look spectacular on this device. The DS, believe it or not, has an emulation on here. Because it's touchscreen, you can actually move the screens around You have two of them show up on screen, and it works surprisingly well. YouTube is great on this app. However, the app itself has a few issues, but you'll still be able to use it to watch my show and all of your other favorite YouTubers. Link in the underbar to my Patreon to support the show. Love you. The battery life on this is spectacular. I'm very happy with this, and I noticed it lasts for days, and I would just pick it up and start playing a game, put it down, and it wouldn't really be dying as I wasn't using it. It was like really good on the reserve power, so I was very impressed with that. You could also use Bluetooth controllers with this device. So if you do the mini HDMI out to your television, you can hook up, say, like a Bluetooth NES controller to the device, and it will recognize it. And I had no issues with that, and that was kind of a cool thing, because then you can consider this to be sort of a mini arcade that you can bring anywhere to your friend's house and just play some Super Nintendo or Nintendo games, or even the classic main games. The HDMI mini output does, like I said, do 1080p, but it stretches it, but it's still a plus. So overall, I'm going to give this device a 7 out of 10 due to the fact that it is quite expensive, over $400 Canadian and about $3 something in the US. GearBest does have sales on this device at random, so if you do want to check out something like this, definitely check to make sure some sort of sale is going on, because this is odd to say, you know, and I don't owe anything to GearBest, but they say it's strange being a YouTuber. They sent this over for review, and when I recommend it, I would only recommend this device for people that are like bloody hardcore into emulation and video games. I mean, I just don't see it being used as an everyday tablet because the controllers don't come off. And in terms of being a tablet with controllers attached to it, there's competition. It's called the Nintendo Switch. It's actually kind of cheaper than this device. And, you know, the problem there is you can't play all the emulation on the Switch yet. So is it coming? I don't know. In closing, I don't recommend buying this unless you're like completely insane and you're rich. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of JKB.